The Renaissance. You hear the word, and you probably think of beautiful paintings, right? But it was so much more than that. This was a complete reprogramming of how we saw the world, and maybe even more importantly, how we saw ourselves. It was this massive, fundamental shift from looking up to the heavens to looking right here, inward, at humanity.
So to really get a grip on just how radical this was, you've got to look at what came before. I mean, medieval art, it was flat, it was symbolic, and pretty much everything was focused on the divine. But then, bam, the Renaissance happens. And suddenly art is just bursting with figures that are realistic, emotional, and just deeply human. So the big question isn't just what changed, it's how on earth did a leap this massive even happen?
All right, so here's our game plan for unpacking this whole revolution. We're going to start with that visual leap itself. Then we'll crack open the artistic toolkit that made it all possible. After that, we'll look at the big ideas and the big money that fueled it all. We'll meet the masters, the legends of the era, and finally, we'll get into why this 500-year-old movement, well, why it still matters to us today.
Okay, so how did this visual revolution actually happen? Well, it all started with a brand new toolkit. And look, we're not talking about better paint or fancier brushes here. This was a completely new set of rules, almost like a secret code that artists unlocked for rendering reality. And it would change art literally forever.
First on the list, linear perspective. Okay, you can pretty much think of this as the world's very first 3D graphics engine. Seriously. But instead of being built with computer code, it was built with math. By following these, systematic rules, artists could suddenly create these incredibly convincing, deep, three-dimensional spaces on a totally flat surface. This one technique was an absolute game changer.
Next up, artists got obsessed with anatomical accuracy. They went way beyond just looking at people. We're talking about real scientific study, sometimes even dissecting bodies, just to understand exactly how the muscles and bones worked under the skin. And the goal? It wasn't just to make things look real. It was to portray the human form with this idealized power and beauty that felt, almost divine.
And finally, artists became absolute masters of light and shadow, using two key techniques. First, you have chiaroscuro. Think high-contrast drama. It makes figures practically pop off the canvas, giving them this real sense of weight and volume. And then there's sfumato. This was Leonardo da Vinci's signature move. It's this soft, smoky blending of edges that gave his figures this just unmatched aura of mystery and life.
So you put all that together, what do you get? You get the secret formula for Renaissance art. It's a deep respect for classical proportion, blended with these totally groundbreaking new tools for creating perspective, understanding anatomy, and mastering light. This right here, this was the technical engine that powered the whole revolution.
But, having a powerful toolkit is one thing. It's useless if you don't have a reason to actually build something with it. So what was the fuel for this incredible creative fire? Well, it was a really potent mix of new ideas, immense power, and, a whole lot of money.
Okay, if there's one single idea you need to know about from this era, it's humanism. The best way to think about it is like a brand new operating system for the European mind. I mean, for centuries, the focus had been almost exclusively on God and the afterlife. Humanism completely shifted that lens. It basically said, hey, human intellect, human potential, our experience right here on Earth, that's not just worthy of study, it's worthy of celebration. And for an artist, wow, that was completely liberating.
And if humanism was the software, well then patronage was the hardware that ran it. You had these incredibly powerful, mega-wealthy families, like the Medici in Florence, just pouring fortunes into commissioning art. And this completely transformed what art was. It wasn't just decoration anymore. No, it became a powerful public statement, a way to basically broadcast your wealth, your political clout, and your piety for everyone to see.
So you've got the tools, you've got the ideas, you've got the money. All of these ingredients came together to create the absolute perfect storm for genius to flourish. So let's meet the titans, the absolute giants who took all of this and created art that, let's be honest, still captivates us hundreds of years later.
But hold on a second. Before we dive into the names, it's so important to understand this massive shift in what it even meant to be an artist. Before the Renaissance, artists were basically seen as anonymous craftsmen, on the same level as a good carpenter. But during the Renaissance, they were elevated to the status of celebrities. They were public intellectuals, celebrated for their unique individual genius. I mean, this was a radical change.
And where else can you start but with the ultimate Renaissance man himself, Leonardo da Vinci. This guy, he just seamlessly blended art and science in a way no one else could, and you can totally see it in his work. Remember that soft, smoky sfumato technique we talked about? He used that to give paintings like the Mona Lisa this uncanny, almost alive, mysterious quality.
Then you've got Michelangelo, the undisputed master of the idealized human form. Whether you're looking at the flawless, heroic power of his sculpture of David, or you're looking up at the epic, swirling drama on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, his work just captures the monumental power and potential of humanity itself. It's breathtaking. And rounding out the big three, we have Raphael, the master of harmony and perfect composition. You look at his masterpiece, The School of Athens, and it's so much more than just a painting of old philosophers. It is a technical tour de force. He uses that linear perspective we talked about to create this perfectly balanced, intellectually buzzing space that just pulls you right into the scene.
Okay, so we've seen the tools, we've seen the ideas, and we've met the masters. But the big question remains, why are we still talking about this stuff 500 years later? What's the big deal? Let's zoom out now and really look at the enduring legacy of the Renaissance.
The ripple effect from this period was just immense. The Renaissance didn't just influence art. It literally wrote the rulebook for Western art for the next 400 years. It established realism, perspective, and anatomy as the gold standard. It laid the groundwork for basically every major art movement that followed. And maybe most importantly, it fused together artistic beauty, scientific knowledge, and deep philosophy in a way that nobody had ever done before.
Just stop and think about that for a second. For over 500 years, the ideas that were born in 15th century Florence have fundamentally shaped our very definition of what we consider beautiful and what we think of as realistic in art. That is an absolutely incredible, enduring power.
And all of this leaves us with one final and I think really fascinating question to chew on. The Renaissance, at its core, was about celebrating a vision of the ideal human. But here we are, 500 years later, and our own ideals, they're constantly changing, right? So what happens to art when our very definition of what's perfect, and maybe even what it means to be human, continues to evolve?